I'm Roniel,
I'm DaRon.
and this is going to be a great episode. We finally get DaRon, and I've been waiting for him to go over, a scenario of a case that he either done or something that he put together, so we can actually go into how he would actually do forensics or looking at a portion of something that might be a part of forensics. So I'll let him kick it off, but I think you guys are in for a real treat. So I'll give it to DaRon to kick off the demonstration.
In today's episode, we're going to go through and actually get to analyze an actual case that I had. And this was a little while back. This particular case involved several cell phones, actually, over the course of time. What had occurred was an individual came to me saying that money had been pulled out of their bank account on multiple occasions, and they were having a real difficult time convincing the bank that their phone had been compromised. So, what I got from this was actually the logs that came from the bank. We were lucky in this particular case because we were able to actually get the logs from the bank itself for this particular user. I've sanitized all of the data here. Everything here is bogus and fake, except for a tiny snippet, which we'll get to. But we've sanitized all the data here. And what we're going to see is that perspective when you're handed logs, and it is your job as a forensics expert to actually analyze and assess the logs and then determine what incident occurred, how it occurred, etc., etc. When we only have logs, which is actually becoming more frequent because now you have things like Azure, you have a lot of SaaS products out there. So if your company happens to be using Azure Active Directory, for example, for all of its authentication, there's no way we're going to get an image of Microsoft's servers. They're just not going to let you do that. Even though you're talking about virtual machines and all this other stuff, it's not going to happen. If you're using something like Gmail or the Google Drive, and I've done a lot of cases involving Google Drive, etc., or Google in general, the Google Cloud services, and AWS, you're not oftentimes going to get an image anymore. What you'll get are the admin consoles, which you can pull logs from. And then it's your job as a forensics professional to pull the logs and then interpret them in a meaningful manner. And what you have to do is bring all the logs together, interpret the logs using the knowledge you have as a real, no kidding, cybersecurity information assurance professional to ascertain exactly what happened. And in today's case, this is going to be actually multiple cell phones, and we'll get to what effectively happened. But we're going to start off from the beginning. So this is the very first little bit from the logs. We can see exactly when this particular user actually started using their website. And she's doing all of this stuff from a mobile application, a mobile phone application. We've talked before and said that's a very dangerous thing to do. If you're going to sit there and do something like that, you need to make sure that that computer, cell phone, whatever it is you're using, is dedicated to that purpose, because that's going to greatly reduce the likelihood that that system is going to get malware. And that's exactly, unfortunately, what happened in this particular case. The individual in question got malware on their phone and bad things occurred. So they set up their system, they get the new passcode, they log in for the first time, they register the device, they start setting things up. So we get a little bit of a flavor as to kind of how this user operates, the way this user behaves. And that's going to be absolutely critical for us. There's no way to distinguish in any case electronically individuals unless you understand how that person generally behaves. You'll know I've already actually marked up this, and we could very well be looking at one that's not marked up, but I figured it would be more beneficial to you, the viewer. So we'll notice we have a lot of that same IP address over and over again. In fact, one of the reasons why I actually originally usually don't get these kinds of things in Excel formats. If you're looking at GCS or things like that, you oftentimes get them in a CSV. In this particular case, what I usually do whenever I get logs like this or any logs in this nature, and it's in something like a CSV, or if it's in a comma separated or tab separated or any of that kind of stuff fashion, I'll usually put it in a spreadsheet application, and then I can apply filters. The reason why that's useful is because now I can sit there and I can quickly look to see the kinds of IP addresses that we see, and I can also just sort and filter, cut, and highlight all of this data real quickly and easily. I know if you're talking to someone like in the SOC, they'd start screaming about using Splunk, but that obviously doesn't apply here. Certainly, we could use an elk stack, but that would, again, that'd be ludicrous. It'd be overkill. And quite frankly, it's just not as nice and friendly as this is, especially because I can now take this spreadsheet and I can export it to a PDF and include it in my report, especially with any highlighting and all of that good stuff. So I definitely advocate using a spreadsheet if you're working in a log exclusive environment where they are commas or tab delineated or something of that sort. It will make your life so much easier, especially for the hardest part. The absolute positively hardest part of any investigation period is finding the malicious activity. There are only a couple of different ways that you can really find it quickly and easily. One of the ways that I have in the past found very successful when looking through logs is looking for things like failures first. If we look at this one and examine the failures first, we're actually going to see immediately these suspicious, pre-marked suspicious activities. And so now we have an instance with some dates tied to it. We notice that based on this here, the user was using something that's iPhone 7. Now we've got an iPhone 6, but we also have an iPhone 7 just a few days later. And it's perfectly possible that the user happens to be having some kind of problem on their end. We can see these two IP addresses match, whereas these ones don't. So you can quickly start to say, okay, well, maybe something's going on here. Maybe this is something I need to pay attention to. Maybe this is some evidence that there is something malicious going on, and I can and should delve significantly further. And maybe I'll be able to track down what all is going on. If nothing comes up or nothing good comes up, then you have to resort to something else. So I can, for example, go through and start looking based on IP address. I can start looking based on my device ID, trying to see, okay, so I see here, this is a nice grouping. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 devices plus one that's marked as a 0 for whatever reason. That's just how the logs came out. So, I mean, that's how it is. I didn't make the logs, I'm just using them. And I can start looking through some of these logs to get a flavor of, okay, I expect, because there are a number of devices, I expect to see it clustered in dates. I don't want to see the devices skipping around. Meaning, if I see a device come online and access this account, and then I see a new device come online and access this account within a block, and then the old device is back on, I start to ask questions. Is this a home system? Are there multiple systems? And if you have an instance where you can actually ask the customer or client questions, that really definitely helps. If, unfortunately, you don't, which is most often the case, you just have to start putting the pieces together. So we're going to go through and let's actually take a gander at these logs, such as they are, real nice and quick, and we'll just zoom through. So we see, again, this is very entry level. This is blase. I'm watching this right here, my transaction amount, and I'm watching transaction type, because those usually are going to be the most important. Remember, what was said in this case is that money was taken from the account, the bank account, on multiple occasions. So I want to try to find those instances where money is taken, and then I can look around those instances to see what kind of behavior I see tied to that. We can actually go through and cheat, and we can use this. More likely than not, it's not going to be a tiny amount, but we'll keep the tiny amounts here just so we can take a peek as to what's going on. Now, obviously, the issue with doing something like this is we wind up losing a bit of data. So since we're filtering, we've lost everything in between. It's safe to say in this particular case that the nefarious person probably didn't go through and deposit checks into this person's account using the same exact phone that we saw earlier and the same IP address we saw earlier. And even though we see the IP address change, that behavior remains the same, and it's still that same phone. So we see the exact same data here between each one of these. You'll notice these transaction IDs have been modified, obviously, as have been the device IDs, etc., etc. So I can quickly say, all right, none of this is involved in malicious activity. None of it. Moving around, still no malicious activity. Still no malicious activity. We don't have any data that's missing from these particular transactions. This is all deposits. It's all very blasé. Now I've got this weird deposit sitting right here. I see the data on this phone has changed. So instead of being this detailed thing here, there's a little less information for some reason, but the device ID itself remains the exact same. So it's a little weird, but that could just be an anomaly from their logs. That's actually fairly common. But I do note we've got this deposit. There's this weird deposit. It's sending money in just like before. But what's missing is this little piece here. So I'm left wondering how this deposit was made. Was it, again, these logs just are incomplete? And incomplete logs are a killer when we're talking about forensics. Because if I go to court and I have a bunch of incomplete logs, you have no clue how quickly a good lawyer is going to trash everything. They would just rip it all to shreds. Well, your logs weren't good already. How can we trust any of the data derived from your logs? And you're left with a bit of a question mark. Now, here's where it gets funny. So we see all these small deposits. We see a small transfer. This one is from checking into savings. It's a small transfer, and it's from one account owned by the individual to another account owned by the individual. We're not seeing any money actually leave until we see this. So here we've got this big transfer. We'll notice this IP address. Y'all don't know this because I obfuscated the other IP addresses, but this one, these aren't in the same country. Mm-hmm. But it's a big withdrawal. It's a huge withdrawal, actually. In fact, we see a series of these withdrawals. So we would mark this. This is a time I really want to mark. Now, add to it, not only do we see this big withdrawal, and this withdrawal looks nothing like the others because it's going from the victim's account to a completely different account. But we look, all of a sudden, and remember, I don't think this particular individual in just a matter of a few days went off and bought an iPhone 11 Pro Max. Most people don't go from an iPhone 7 to an 11 Pro Max and then start withdrawing massive amounts of money from their account. And here's the other thing. Not only was this transfer done, But after they shifted the money out of savings and into checking, they then pulled the money out of checking and sent it to a different bank account using Zelle.
That's very suspicious.
Yes, this is very suspicious. You know what makes it even more suspicious? Latitude and longitude changed.
Yeah.
So that's right. So we've got the device IDs changed. The device type changed from a plain Jane, actually a very low cost iPhone 7 model, to a wow whiz bang fancy modern super expensive model. The IP is not in the same country. The money was transferred, huge amounts of money transferred, and you'll notice they broke it up when they transferred it out of the account. And there's actually a good reason for that. But importantly, while you can't see it because the latitude and longitude values have been obscured in these legitimate ones, these, completely different country. These are from Nigeria.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then you can't. I mean, you probably get alerted for. I don't know if she had anything set up this first time, but you probably get alerted for a certain amount of money going out, especially with Zelle. Sometimes they don't let you send that large amount of money out, so you have to separate it.
Right. That's exactly right. And the reason why places like Zelle and Wells Fargo, etc., go through and limit that is to prevent this very kind of thing. And you'll notice they transferred the money to different accounts. Mm-hmm. So here's phone number 1, here's phone number 2. I did go through, these phone numbers are fake because they may have been accounts of phones that had also already been compromised. That's highly likely. So to protect those individuals, I did change those as well. But the area codes of both are actually what they originally were. And you can see it's completely, utterly, totally different from where this individual is. Everything about this reeks of compromise. Everything. Which is funny because the bank fought them on it.
That is horrible.
Yeah.
You have to have the banks.
Yes. This actually, funny story about that particular bank. This is actually a bank I ran an engagement against. I ran a penetration test against. And this is the bank where they took my report and I compromised them horribly. They took my report and they threw it straight in the trash. So I gave it to the CISO. He said to me, "Oh, thank you." And right in front of me, he just puts it in the trash. And I said, "Well, aren't you going to read that?" He said, "No. If I read that, I have to do something about what's in the report. My regulations and my PCI, etc., only state that I have to have penetration tests done. They don't state that I have to read the report. But if I read it, I have to act upon it because then it's a known vulnerability and I have to fix known vulnerabilities." I never did work for them again. And I don't plan on doing work for them again.
That's the point of a penetration test. Don't they get audited? All the time.
Yeah, they get audited, but they can tell the auditor, yeah, we get regular penetration tests. I mean, you remember what a certain organization we were at did. I mean, they played all kinds of games with the auditors. And the auditors don't usually know better.
I'm about to say, when I was working at IBM, it was a no. The auditors were like, "No, we need to see evidence." And yes. I had to provide evidence.
Yes. In the government realm, they will actually look at your system as well, and they will look for evidence, and you have to have evidence for everything. Evidence that the engagements were performed, evidence that you created any, they're called POAMs, but you created any plan of actions of milestones tied to any findings, and then that you mitigated and or otherwise remediated those particular issues within a certain schedule. Apparently these guys don't have the same. But these are also the same people who said that a Nigerian transferring money straight out of your account isn't suspicious. So, I mean,
And she's not Nigerian.
She's not Nigerian. Never been out of this country as far as I know. And if she has, it would have only been to, a neighboring country. So definitely not Nigeria.
Man, that's sad.
Well, so we highlight these and we're going to get back to it. Now, here's the thing. Once you find an area, you have some place to look around, because 100% guarantee this was not the first activity on this system. That is always, always, always the case. I guarantee in every single instance, the big compromise that you find and detect in the logs was not the preliminary compromise. You were compromised before.
Mm-hmm.
And most certainly you were attacked before. They just came back after they found blood in the water.
Yeah.
All right, so we keep looking. Again, we're back to that standard activity. Nothing big. Nothing huge. All right, so now we have, again, this reeks of the same thing that we saw earlier. Now, it's a little weird. So we've got this iPhone XR. I don't know what that is. I don't know anything about that because I don't use Apple products.
Yeah, that's a different phone. It's a little smaller.
Yeah. Well, I knew it was a different phone. I didn't know it was smaller, so I assume it's cheaper?
Yeah, definitely cheaper. They're light, plasticky too.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. We see the individual, the victim in this case, they did change their phone. Very clearly, they changed their phone at some point during all of this, and then they get compromised again. And there's actually quite a little bit of span between these.
I mean, we don't know exactly how she got compromised. We know how she got recon. Can you talk a little bit about how that happened and how to fix that for somebody who may have been compromised and don't understand?
Sure. So because the original phone is gone and the second phone is gone, what occurred was she's your stereotypical victim of this kind of thing, unfortunately, in that she's not a tech savvy individual. She's certainly not a security savvy individual. I feel I can say that most certainly without anyone taking umbrage. And somehow she got what appears to have been infected, most likely by a botnet. So she's probably part of a greater botnet. It appears, and we'll get to it a little bit more when we look in depth at the logs surrounding, that she was most likely compromised by the Russians first. And they sold time on the botnet to the Nigerians, who blew the botnet, blew at least her portion of it by using it to go off and steal all this money from these systems. And then she got rid of that phone because it's infected. I mean, I don't blame her. Honestly, with something like phones can be very difficult to clean. Very difficult to clean. It really depends on how badly you were infected, how you were infected. So she gets a new phone. But what she didn't know was, even though they being wherever she bought the phone from, didn't go through and transfer the data from one phone to another, her phone automatically restored from backups. So she pulled down from the iCloud all the backups of her other phone's data, and that includes the malware. So she's still part of that botnet, and that's how she gets hit yet again, despite having a completely different phone. And this is very common. It's extraordinarily common. You need to make certain when you get a new phone that you do not let it restore any of your old data from backups. That data, as far as you're concerned, it's not gone. You just can't pull it from the phone. You've got to go through and pull it from outside of the phone to get it, or take the actual phone, give it to a digital forensics professional, let them go through and extract if it's photos, if it's video, whatever it is, let them extract that, and then they can hand that to you nice and safe. That's the best way to do it.
Awesome. Yeah, just wanted to give people context that even though I know you probably were going to go down and talk about, just some great ideas of if you are infected, what to do, procedures, and then what not to do and how to remediate or fix some of the issues. You may not be able to fix your phone, but it's definitely good not to restore things from backup. Even if you're getting a new phone in general, I normally don't restore anything from backup. I kind of choose what I want to pick from if I'm going to do anything. But normally I don't restore anything from backup. I just start out fresh. And then again, as DaRon said, it's better to separate. I have a phone for personal, and that only is personal stuff. No gaming, no nothing. I have a phone for games, and it has nothing personal. None of my, banking apps or nothing that I'm doing anything on there. That is just a game, phone for gaming or
Yeah.
whatever I'm going to do on that. Same with computers.
Yes.
You have your personal computer. You have this stuff that you're going to do all your bull crap on. So you definitely want to start doing segmentation when you're thinking about that on your phone and devices as well.
Yes, and if you happen to be an individual who doesn't have much money, which we both can definitely understand, we've been there, then our recommendation is just use, if you're going to use that phone for your banking, just use that for banking and making calls. Don't use it for anything else, period. I mean, I'm sure everyone wants to have Candy Crush and TikTok and all these games and stuff on their phone, but you need to make certain that your data is safe. If the banking application, that banking mobile application, hadn't been on this phone, they could not have taken her data. Having said that, and we'll take a peek at this in a little more detail after we isolate the different instances, I want to be very clear. This user could not have done much to have prevented what went on, because she even turned on things like the biometrics, and they were able to turn them off with their phone. They turned off her alarms, the alerts that she should get. They turned all of that stuff off, all of it off, so that they could go through and do their thing. She had actually multi-factor and multi-step authentication enabled. But multi-step authentication doesn't do you any good if that text message is sent to the phone in question. Because if they've compromised your phone, well, they've compromised that. Or if it's sent to an email that phone happens to get. And then the biometrics are not what people think they are. They really are not good. They don't work well. So it's not the user's fault. And actually, I really honestly blame heavily the bank, especially because, as we'll see, the bank never reset her preferences. So between the different attacks, all her alerts that she didn't know had been turned off in the first attack still remained turned off for the second attack. And then when she re-enabled them for the second, after the second attack, they just turned them right back off and hit her again, which we'll get to shortly. So we see this is, again, very similar activity as the last time, but you'll notice they're taking smaller amounts. It's actually one of the big differences between organizations in Ghana and Nigeria as compared to Russia, Turkey, Iran, and China. North Korea kind of sits in the middle. But usually what you'll see is Ghana and Nigeria, they will take as much money as they can, or at least they'll take huge chunks. Whereas Russia, they've been doing this for a while, and so the Chinese and the Turks and Iranians, they're more likely to take a smaller amount, an amount that you won't necessarily notice. Now, tied to that, you have to know how much money's in the account, and I don't know that they paid any attention to it. So they took enough that it made a big difference, because this individual, like so many people, didn't necessarily have much to have been taken. So we see, again, these big transfers into that checking from the savings, transfers from savings into checking again. Now, this is from savings to savings, but they're different accounts. And then we see that same exact thing using Zelle yet again. Now, the funny thing was they actually had disabled Zelle. So after the first attack, they disabled Zelle. These guys just re-enabled it. In fact, they were the ones who set it up in the first place, and we'll see that as well. So again, I really heavily fault the bank, because if the system gets compromised once and they disable Zelle and tell you they don't want you to allow transfers through Zelle, why would you re-enable? Why would you allow Zelle to be re-enabled on that account?
Mm-hmm.
Now, this time, one big important thing we'll note is look at the phone. So again, the phone this time didn't change. It's the exact same phone. Nothing about it has changed. The IP addresses are actually the same IP addresses that we saw before. So in this particular case, unlike in the Nigerian case, where the Nigerians just took a phone, logged into her account, and added themselves, and we'll see that in the logs, these guys did it all strictly through her phone. All of it. Every little bit. So this is what I would expect to see from the Chinese and the Russians. In fact, this particular instance is Russian activity, whereas your other instance was very much Nigerian. They didn't even try to cover it. Okay, so we've given ourselves 2 specific dates to wander around. You'll notice I had mentioned something about 3 compromises, and we'll get to that in a second. So now that we've found dates to look around and activity generally that gives us like a smell test, not only for what we should expect from this user, but what we should not expect to see, let's turn off our filters. So we're going to check everything here. And let's just take a quick look based on those dates that we happen to have. But as we do it, we'd be running through looking for things like data that just is incomplete. Like in this case, these 2 are zeros. Why they're zeros, I don't know. They're not my logs. They came from the bank. My data wouldn't have zeros.
No.
And again, same thing. We've got zeros there, zeros here. Now, these zeros seem to all be tied to this little segmentation rule ID, zeros, retail. This is just completely unrelated to anything, and it's just as the individual was going about and using the mobile phone application, there seems to be some kind of bug that they should look into, but it's not my problem. So we see more of that stuff. And we're scrolling down. We want to go to about where we had the first incident. We'll ignore that one for a second. That was when she first got compromised. Okay, so we're when we had that first incident. All right, this was actually that day right here. So the first thing we notice is login. Now, we look at the time. What I had done ahead of time is I'd actually paid close attention as to when this phone was usually on, when this phone was usually off, when this phone was usually being used, and that kind of information. So like I said, you build up that profile of the person's general use. But here's where it gets real funny. So authentication. Then they go into the hub, do the thing that you would normally expect someone who's authenticating, and then they log out. Why would you have logged out? There's no legitimate reason for the particular user to log out, except this, forgot password.
To change it.
Yep, that's exactly right. So they now change the password and log into the system. Remember, these are the Nigerians. This is the first one where they go through and they log in via another phone in another continent. I cannot stress that enough.
Idiot.
And you see this here? So now, send passcode. So this is that, just part of that validation portion, because what they're trying to do is register their second phone. So we went from, they verified after they reset the credentials, they verified that they could log in, and they verified it twice. That's what this activity is here. The next thing they do is they pull up their phone right here. This is the first time. They pull up their phone, and now they have to add the phone. So this thing is going to go through and it's going to send an SMS, and it sends it to her phone. But they're in control of her phone. So they immediately see that SMS. They see here that it got delivered, and they registered their phone. So this was her phone number. They registered their phone and they're logged in. Now you'll notice here we've got a little bit of a break. The reason why we had that break is because they're verifying that everything matches up, and then they go back to their phone, they log in again, and see this? They turn off the alerts globally. Why the hell this bank has a setting that lets you turn off all alerts globally, I do not understand. Just can't, I don't get it. I don't understand.
About the Nigerians is why did they try to log in from their phone when they could have just did everything they needed?
They could have done everything that they needed from her phone, and that's actually a really good question. So what we actually see if we look at the other attacks was there was a lead up where they were actually spying on her phone very carefully, monitoring when she was using it. Now, if you think about that, that's real spooky shit, because what does that mean they also had access to?
All type of other stuff.
Everything. And they could turn on her camera, the microphone, and they could see and listen in. And this gets even more spooky when we look at when they disable her multi-factor authentication, because she passed the face test. When you are in complete control of the phone, I mean, you can keep a good eye on everything. And why you would want to do that is to make sure that the user isn't going to notice when you're doing all this nefarious stuff. Well, these Nigerians, they were going to be loud, and they were going to be just blow through it nice and fast. These guys, they don't care that they burn the asset. And that's what it's called. So when you're so noisy that everyone knows you were there, and now that asset can no longer be used by anyone else. They bought time on this botnet, and they're rude clients. They don't give a damn that they're really burning that botnet by hitting her system as noisily as they are. So it is interesting, but this is the type of activity, this is a difference that I would expect to see from Ghana and Nigeria as compared to Russia and China, where they tend to try. China gets noisy. China likes to burn assets too, but that's usually because when they do it, they like to nuke all your data. So they like to just delete everything. Russian organized crime does that only in the case of ransomware. Other than that, they don't nuke your stuff. They sit on it, they bug it, they collect data, they sell that data, and then they also sell time on your device. That's what the Russians generally do. But the Chinese will nuke it like mad. The Chinese also will do espionage, but they really like to nuke systems real hard. Nigerians, if it's a money scam, they always nuke it. They don't give a damn. So we see here, this is that transfer that we saw originally, and we see some other activity tied to that. We see here, you see what they're doing here? Yeah. They're locking her out. Mm-hmm. They're locking her out by putting on multi-factor authentication so that she can't get into her own phone. So they logged out, logged in, locked her out. So they've changed her credentials, and then they go through and make it so that she really can't get in, because not only does she not have the password, she doesn't have the face either. You'll notice now they're showing all the account number, they're grabbing account number data. Now they're trying to set up Zelle. This was the fucking funniest thing, I have to tell you. The funniest thing. She was not actually enrolled in Zelle. They enrolled her, and they had real trouble. And we can see them struggling to get Zelle up. And
Zelle was not easy to get up.
Apparently not. Tell the Nigerians.
Like, literally, you try to go to and like set up Zelle to your banking, it literally is a fucking pain. And
yes.
By God, if you even get an email to get set up, it's just like disappears.
Yes.
Or it doesn't even work. So Zelle's not easy. That's
That's
funny.
that's funny. That is funny. I like that. All right, so they had trouble. They struggled. They did not manage to get what they wanted originally. We'll notice they haven't actually pulled the money out of the account. What they've done is they've concentrated the money so far. So now they've locked her out. Since she's completely locked out, they kind of struggled. Honestly, they were probably waiting for the IT guy to come. You'll see there's no activity until about 2 hours later. And this is actually still that malicious activity. This is still all of them logging in as her, as they're trying to get back into the system. So now we've got that login again. Now they're again trying to set Zell up. Still working on trying to set Zell up. Now they're finally getting to the point where they can get into that enrollment. And again, we see that SMS message is sent to the victim's phone, which they're in complete control of. So they immediately are able to enroll, finally. They enroll completely and they shoot the money out. And now that money's gone and it's not coming back. They shoot more money out and shoot more money out. And here we are. So now the poor victim comes in. She's trying to go through and reset her password. She actually struggled really hard to get her password set up and to recover from this. And it took a good long time before she was where she needed to be. She did go through, get biometrics set up. They put on multi-factor authentication. She's back on her merry way and doing her good thing. The one thing I want to show you real quickly is the activity for when her phone was first really compromised. We actually looked into it a little bit, and her phone got compromised long before, and we see these login failures going on here, and this passcode gets sent. During this whole time frame, her phone's already been compromised. She's already been hit by the Russians, and her phone is part of a botnet at this point. This was the first activity from the bank perspective that we can see where her phone itself has been compromised.
And it goes from an iPhone 6 to iPhone 7.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly right. And this is one of the really big things that you have to learn how to pay attention to when you're doing digital forensics is it's oftentimes the little tiny things that all matter. And this is one of the reasons why there really is a gulf between what you do when you're doing SOC versus incident responder versus actual digital forensics. Even when we talk about examining logs, and examining logs is one of the things that we as digital forensics professionals do a lot. But when we examine logs, it's in a very different manner than what the SOC is doing. We're not examining it through anything like that. It's a very different flavor. It's much more technical, and it's actually examining the log in its entirety instead of examining this aggregate of all these logs from all these different systems. I'm examining this system, and then I'm going to pull in logs from that system. I'm going to pull in logs from that system, but they're selected. And then I'm pulling in data from the file system. I'm pulling in data from the operating system. I'm pulling in data from the application. So much stuff is coming all together, and I'm coupling that with network knowledge and network logs. It all comes together in this very different picture, but this should give you kind of the flavor when you only have logs to go off of. And these aren't even logs that we were in control of. These are just logs that we were given. Two very separate matters altogether. But we have a good picture just from these logs as to when she first got compromised. We actually have a good picture. We found out she got compromised more than she even knew. We see again, here she is with the Russians snooping again, trying to see what all they have access to. We've got this repeated looking for bank accounts. This is after the Nigerians, after she's gone through, she's tried cleaning her phone, and they're checking to see, hey, what do I have access to? Oh, look, I still have access to everything. And you see that repeated show account, show account, show account. Okay, I still have all this stuff. I can still sell it. And now we've got her trying to get that regain that access to her phone again as she gets this new phone. And it's really sad because it's very, very difficult. It can be incredibly difficult. And we see, I mean, they're on her new phone, but it's so hard to recover from a lot of these compromises. And we see this nice lead up. So this is October of 2020. Still more activity, October, and you're now in November. Now in November, we get this weird lockout. Her account gets mysteriously locked out because the password is wrong. Bet you know what's coming up next. So this is November 20th, and we start marching down, and here we are, December 7th, our second round. This is actually really round 3, but the second round of major exfiltration of money. So this is what's called wire fraud and bank fraud. It's also computer abuse or computer fraud. But we see here just that same general, they see the alerts turned on, and frankly, they just don't care. They re-enable Zelle, and we've got this login using the face, and away they go, taking her money yet again. It is unfortunate, and they were quite active. And then we see right here, the account gets locked yet again. But that's a very quick rundown. This isn't as in-depth and as detailed as you normally obviously would go. But this kind of gives you a flavor of when we're looking through logs, maybe the approach to try to get into it, the approach to try to find the surrounding data. Once you have those dates, when an incident occurred, you start to look for that precursor, and then you start to look for activity afterward, and you look for anything in between. And that's exactly what we wound up seeing as we looked through these logs. And this was an unfortunate situation that could have largely been mitigated by the bank. She got compromised multiple times, and money was taken from her account on actually multiple days. As if you look through the logs, it got taken from her account on 3 separate days. And the bank really screwed up, because they left, knowing that the account had been compromised, they left all of the compromised settings in place. And so she didn't even know. I mean, you don't know what someone's done to your account when they've been all over it and to trace it all back, but the bank did. They definitely knew how her account was set up before. And they didn't fix anything, and she got compromised yet again and had no clue.
So, just as somebody, just say I didn't know none of this, but just say that she's compromised. She did the right thing. She, got a new phone, pretty much. She changed all her passwords or whatever, but she didn't, just say she didn't actually restore from backup, didn't do any of that stuff. Would they still be able to compromise her phone again if she didn't do none of that stuff and she resetted her accounts and all of that? Would they still have access to be able to do that?
They should not have, unless they had managed to get their malware from her phone onto her computer and she synced up to her computer. See, and that's where you wind up getting, that's one of the worst parts is now, they want to sync the computer and phone together and all this other stuff. And
that's why I always say, do not sync. Apple likes to sync everything. I hate it. I don't sync nothing. I don't want my phone talking to this computer or nothing. Do not do it. Keep your shit, segregated, segmentation, whatever you want to call it. Keep it away from each other, because that shit is not a game. You really want to stay on top of this stuff, especially when it comes to your banking account.
I agree.
That is your everything. Which, it's funny. I always tell this. I treat everything the same, even with your banking and card. When you go out and you go to a restaurant or you go to a McDonald's, doesn't matter. I would prefer a prepaid card than something that ties to my main account, because people literally like to take and write down your account numbers or your card number and then reuse it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, so I do everything I treat as a security risk.
Yes.
So
Yes. Yes. No, you're spot on, and that's why you shouldn't use things like your debit card to pay for things. I mean, that's the worst because banks, so like in this particular case, just in case anyone's wondering, the bank technically has to refund it. When you cry fraud, banks get insurance actually for this. They have complete insurance. Now, what happened in this case is the bank fought them. And I guarantee you, the bank actually, the second they were notified, immediately put in an insurance claim and got the money from the federal government. And then they cried foul and were saying, oh no, this was legitimate activity. When, I mean, anyone who looks at those logs sees neither of those instances were legitimate, and it's very obvious. Yes, the one, they used her phone and were only on her phone, but the other one, there's no way you can ever possibly justify the Nigerian incident as being legitimate. But I guarantee what they were trying to do was double dip. They wanted the money from the federal government on the insurance for the fraud claim, and then they wanted to also not give her her money, because what they're supposed to do is they are supposed to take that money and then give it to her. Well, if they're holding on to it, the longer they hold on to it, they're collecting interest. This is very common for banks to do. Legally, they get 14 days. They have to complete their investigation and refund you your money within 14 days. That's federal law. And if you don't know that, they're going to jerk you around and you're going to wind up getting, it's going to be a big pain. And that's what they tried to do to her. And it was a terrible situation.
but even then, like, even if when we got to the part where the Russians used her phone, they're transferring that to an account.
Yes.
All right. So
Yes.
why would I be transferring it to that account? And then I'm sure they have processes to go to see where that stuff is being transferred from or to. Like,
Yes.
why would I be? And especially if you look at my activity, why would I be transferring to somebody out in Russia?
Yes.
Or wherever they put it out overseas or somewhere?
Yes.
Like,
yes.
You can just tell that the bank, and I've worked for the banks before, and their security is crap.
Oh, it's terrible. But they will all tell you it's so phenomenal.
And I remember going into the bank and telling them how shitty they're when I had said I worked for you guys before, and your security is shitty, so I don't trust none of the stuff you're trying to sell me. And he's like, but we're I said no. I take precautions on my own because the shit that you're trying to sell me is not going to work.
Yeah.
They had these picture things that they were doing at first, and I'm like, this is bullshit. Like, there's a lot of ways to guess somebody if you're really, really stalking them, to guess what their things are.
Yes.
And I said, this is not good. Like, that's not going to work, So I think he kind of knew. He was asking me like, what do you do for them? And I said, I do the stuff that you would dream about. So anyway, it's crazy, but yeah, all in all, guys, segmentation.
Yeah.
With everything in your life that's important to you.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's important. That's the best way you're going to be able to secure your things. Do not use your business phone or your personal phone to play games.
Yeah.
Don't let your daughter or your kids, nobody, nothing. Do not use it. I always have something separate if you have the money. If not, then you're just not going to be playing games on that. Play games on something else. That's why we got PlayStations and all that other shit you can play games on. But your phone is, with all your stuff on there, is your sacred.
Yeah.
Same thing for your cards. You don't use your debit card for transactions. All right. Use a prepaid card. Use your Cash App card. Whatever the hell you want to use. Yeah. Use that. Do not use your personal card. I'm telling you, it's better to live this way, even though it may be hard. It makes it more secure.
Yes. 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 The truth is, the alternative is so much worse. If you I deal with a lot of people who get their credit cards stolen, who get their accounts compromised, and it is horrendous, absolutely horrible. It can take years to fix the damage that they do.
Yeah, so always use precaution. Like I said, I'd seen this so many times. It happened to people in my family, and I always had to tell them this is how you need to set up your life.
Yeah.
to have a secure life, because the companies are not going to do it for you. Don't give a shit about your privacy or security.
Yeah.
So unless you give a shit about it, nobody's going to give a shit about it. So when people see me, they ask me, why do I have all these computers and all these cards and different banks and different this, and why do I do this for that? And then it's all for a reason. My sacred account, my sacred card, whatever you want to call it, that is not being utilized for anything with whatever's coming into it. And if it's going out, it should be something I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't use it for anything online. None of that. No.
Right.
No.
Right. I completely agree.
So, but anyway, I hope you guys like this demonstration. We will have more in the future. I'm Roniel.
I'm DaRon.
And if you haven't already, please like, comment, and subscribe. And for more content like this, you definitely got to like. If you would like to see this content continue, please subscribe, like, all that. And if you want anything, any new or any specific content, please tell us down in the comment section and we'll look into it. Other than that, until the next time.
Have fun.
Ready?
Yeah.
All right.
I'm Roniel.
And are you?
Oh, fuck no. I'm sorry, I was staring at you.
I was like, wait. I thought you was DaRon. Are you?
I was staring at you, wondering if you were going to say your thing, and then
okay.
I started saying mine, and wow.
Okay, that's fine. I can go. I didn't know if you wanted to go because several times you went. So, I didn't know you was Ryan. That would have been a good. He's Ryan and I'm DaRon.
Finally, get the names right, damn it.
All right, let's start it over. I'm gonna start it over.